This is Grammar Points 5-2, Lesson 36, about semicolons. People often have difficulty determining whether they should use a comma or a semicolon. So before getting into semicolons, I'm going to quickly review how to use a comma. Remember that commas separate items in a series, like I went to the store and I bought ice cream, comma, milk, comma, and eggs. You can also use it to set off interrupting information, like my brother, comma, who lives in Virginia, comma, is coming to my house, period. As in the examples here. Will there be drinks, snacks, and games at the party? Here you see that you've got 1, 2, 3 items, and they're being separated by commas here. And then, Chicago, the largest city in Illinois, this information is not vital information, but it does give more information about Chicago. Commas can also be used for interrupting information, such as the examples below. On a beautiful spring day, they had a picnic. Note that on a beautiful spring day is a dependent clause, meaning it cannot stand by itself. They had a picnic, you've got a subject, you have a verb, so this is a full sentence, but on a beautiful spring day is not a complete sentence. And looking at the other examples, picnics can be a lot of fun. That's your complete sentence or your independent clause. An old tradition, this is dependent, it cannot stand by itself. It is just describing picnics. Dad grilled ribs, that's the complete sentence. The big ones from Costco just describes the ribs. And sometimes if it is non-essential information, it does not get a comma, as we discussed in an earlier unit, but the guy smiled. That's your sentence. Who sold them to him? Which guy? The guy who sold them to him. It's just giving more information. These non-essential phrases can come at the beginning, the middle, or at the end of a sentence. Now, unlike commas, which go between dependent and independent clauses, semicolons are more like a period. They go between two dependent clauses, but the difference between a semicolon and a period is that a semicolon will join two independent clauses that are very connected together, whereas a period would separate sentences or independent clauses that could have slightly different meanings. So if you want to show a strong connection between one sentence and the next independent clause, you can use a semicolon instead of a period. It's, as they say here, it is also like using the word furthermore. You're giving more information. Here are some examples. My mom said I couldn't go to the party. I didn't want to go anyway. So it's connected with the idea of not going to the party. Bananas are a healthy snack. They contain potassium, which may help your vision. So this second independent clause connects with the first independent clause very directly. We're going to look at a couple of sentences and see if we can determine whether they get a comma or a semicolon and why. My sister Amy, my friend Kyle, and I went to the park. Here we have a list, so we'd say my sister Amy, comma, my friend Kyle, comma, and I went to the park. You do not have a dependent clause and you do not have additional independent clauses here. You just have one sentence with a compound subject. My Aunt Sally, who is my favorite aunt, talked to my mom. So the main independent clause here is my Aunt Sally talked to my mom. But you have this additional information, who is my favorite aunt, which you could set apart with commas. Number 3, most fruits are low in fat. They are also high in vitamins. Now here you have most fruits are low in fat. They are also high in vitamins. You've got subjects, most fruits, and they. You've got verbs, are. So you have two independent clauses here, which means you'd need to join them with a semicolon. When we left the park, the one at the end of the block, we went home. Again, When we left the park, we went home. The first clause here is kind of non-essential information. It's just telling you when they left the park. So normally you would put a comma here. When we left the park, and then you've also got some additional information. The one at the end of the block, comma, we went home. But we went home, this is your main sentence. Now we'll go through 10 other example sentences. Number 1, the artist preferred to paint in oils. He did not like watercolors. So you look at these two parts here and you see if they are dependent or independent clauses. Both of them, as you can see, have subjects. They have verbs. So you've got two independent clauses here. And you're choosing between using a comma or a semicolon. So we have to use a semicolon here. Number 2. Even when the house looks clean, there is usually a bunch of dirt swept under the rug. So the first part of the sentence here, even when the house looks clean, this is not an independent sentence. It's just giving you some additional information. So it is not a semicolon, it's a comma. There is usually a bunch of dirt swept under the rug. You've got a subject and a verb, so this is your main sentence. Number 3, I'm going to leave early today unless the boss comes back from the meeting. Now this time you've got unless the boss comes back from the meeting. This is the additional information coming at the end of a sentence, but you're still going to put a comma here. It is not, this second clause is not an independent clause. You cannot say unless the boss comes back from the meeting and have it stand by itself. Number 4, the computer can perform many calculations at once. However, it cannot reason at all. Now here you've got a big hint. It's got the word however there, and however comes when you do join two sentences together with a semicolon. It is often you have the word however in the beginning of the second independent clause, so right away we know we need to put a semicolon here. But even if that wasn't a hint for you, you've got a subject and a verb here and a subject and a verb here. Number 5, in the first place it was snowing too hard to see the road. In the second place we had no chains. This one's pretty complicated. You've got in the first place and in the second place. These are two kind of non-essential bits of information, but they are not independent clauses. They're prepositional phrases giving you a kind of order to what's happening in this story. But the clause that follows that is independent. You've got a subject and a verb, so you have two independent sentences here. You need a semicolon in the middle. Number 6. Italy is my favorite foreign country. In fact, I plan on staying there for 3 weeks this summer. The first part here, you've got a subject and a verb. Even though you've got in fact, this is kind of additional information, but you've got I plan, subject and verb, so semicolon. In number 7, we have the challenges are not impossible, but they are very hard to clear. So you've got a subject and verb in both of these clauses, but you also have the word but here. And we know that but is how you connect two sentences in a compound sentence. So if but wasn't there, you could put a semicolon, but because it's there, we have to put a comma, making this a compound sentence. In number 8, I'm going to do all of my English homework every night because that's how you get an A. A being a high grade. You've got a subject and verb here, so this is your main independent clause. And the second part, because that's how you get an A, this is a dependent clause. It cannot stand by itself. Now, when this kind of clause comes at the end of a sentence, you actually don't have to put a comma. If it was in the beginning, you could say, because it's how you get an A, comma, I'm going to do all of my English homework every night. But when it comes at the end of a sentence, you do not have to put a comma. So I'm just going to put a big X here because you don't need to put a semicolon and you don't need to put a comma. In number 9, if he misses his appointment, he'll have to wait another 6 months to see the dentist. If he misses his appointment, this is a conditional, it's a dependent clause. It cannot stand by itself, so we're just going to put a comma. He will have to, so you've got the subject and the verb here. Number 10, there are many negative side effects to smoking. There are no positive side effects from smoking. You've got subjects and verbs in both of these independent clauses, so you're going to put a semicolon in the middle.